When I first walked through the glass doors of Del Marco and Sons, no one looked up. My name is Rebecca. I'm a senior HR consultant, 43 years old, and after 2 decades working with corporate restructurings, I've learned that the real culture of a company lives in its silence. The way people greet, or don't, the pauses after introductions, the glances exchanged when you say your name. The receptionist smiled vaguely when I introduced myself. "Oh, the external HR?" she asked, as if unsure whether to shake my hand. I nodded, and she buzzed me through without another word. No one met me at the elevator. That first week, no one sat with me in the break room. No one offered to show me where the bathroom was or how to access the internal server. It was as if my presence was inconvenient, an interruption in a well-established rhythm. I asked for previous employee turnover reports. They were sent 2 days late. I requested performance reviews. Half were missing. Every question I asked was met with a look that said, "Why are you even here?" I've seen this before. In companies like this, family-run, cliquish, rooted in routine, outsiders are threats. And women like me, with firm posture and no interest in small talk, are unwelcome reminders that change is coming. Still, I stayed quiet. I observed. A tall man with rolled-up sleeves and loud laughter made sure to introduce himself loudly at meetings, interrupting when I spoke. A younger woman in graphic design chuckled whenever I made a point, whispering into her coffee cup to the woman beside her. I memorized names and faces. I noted body language. I started building my map. By Friday, I noticed a pattern. Every calendar invite I received came from the director. Not a single colleague had added me to any team meeting, planning session, or casual Friday lunch. I wasn't part of the tribe, and someone wanted me to feel that. I didn't react. I responded the only way I know how. I kept watching. That's when the mistake happened. Small, but enough. An intern made a passing joke in the hallway about a funny meme Rebecca would never get. The others laughed. I smiled politely, but in my mind, something had clicked. The following Monday, I arrived 10 minutes earlier than usual. Not out of anxiety, but precision. People reveal themselves in the moments they think no one's watching. I passed by the small glass-walled conference room near the design department. Inside, 4 employees were huddled around a phone, laughing. The woman from last week, the one who whispered over her coffee, locked eyes with me through the glass. Her smile faded. In the break room later, I warmed up my coffee beside a younger intern named Danny. She seemed newer, maybe 2 months in. Nervous hands, eager tone. I asked casually how her onboarding was going, what software she was using. "Oh, it's a little chaotic," she said, shrugging. "But at least the group helps." "What group?" I asked, stirring my coffee slowly. She hesitated, then blinked quickly. "Oh, just the WhatsApp one. You know, the team chat. Everyone's in there." I nodded once. She bit her lip, realizing I hadn't been invited. "Oh, maybe they just forgot to add you." I didn't reply. I returned to my desk, opened a new file, and typed, "WhatsApp group, internal, consultant excluded, confirmed by intern Danny." That evening, I took my time leaving. I waited in the hallway near the glass room until the last light flickered off. As I walked past a desk, I noticed a screen still glowing. Someone had left WhatsApp web open. I didn't touch anything. I didn't have to. A row of chat previews was enough. One said, "Did you see what Rebecca wore today?" with a laughing emoji. Another, "She's probably reporting everything back to the mothership." I memorized the names in the chat header. Back in my apartment, I poured myself a glass of water and sat in silence. I wasn't angry, not even offended. This was familiar. I'd seen these dynamics play out in boardrooms, factories, startups. The only difference was how quickly they'd written me off. I wasn't surprised. But now I had confirmation. I wasn't being ignored by accident. They were coordinating. By the end of my second week, the coldness wasn't subtle anymore. It had teeth. During a departmental sync, I presented a basic proposal to streamline onboarding documentation, a simple, non-invasive suggestion. Halfway through, Lucas, the tall man with the loud voice, interrupted with a smirk. "We've been doing it this way for years," he said. "Maybe it's just a matter of adjusting expectations." A few people laughed. I didn't. Later that day, my name was mysteriously removed from a shared presentation I had been working on. No explanation. When I asked about it in a calm email, I received no reply. But someone printed out the updated slides and left them on my desk with a sticky note. This version's more polished. No name, no smiley face. By Friday, I noticed my seat in the conference room had been unofficially relocated. Someone else now took it every meeting. I had to sit at the far end of the table, beside the assistant who rarely spoke. I didn't complain. I didn't shift my tone. I kept documenting, word for word, action by action. The worst moment came during a Friday briefing. A mid-level manager named Julia made a passing comment about external consultants who don't understand our company culture. She didn't look at me, but she didn't need to. The message was clear. The room was silent except for a few coughs and keyboard taps. Afterward, a junior employee named Mauro came up to me discreetly in the hallway. "Hey, just so you know, not everyone agrees with what they're doing. Some of us actually think your insights are helpful." I looked at him and smiled. "Thanks, Mauro. That means a lot." It did, but not because I needed comfort. It was because I now knew who was watching from the margins, who understood that what was happening wasn't just passive exclusion. It was targeted humiliation, and it was escalating. I returned to my desk, opened the growing file I had named Internal Dynamics, Del Marco, and logged every detail of the week. There was a pattern now, a rhythm, and I wasn't just documenting behavior. I was tracing power. The invitation arrived late Friday evening. Subject line, confidential, strategic meeting. Sender, Antonio Vasquez, Executive Director. I arrived 10 minutes early. Antonio was already there. Gray suit, thin-rimmed glasses, eyes that scanned the room like a chessboard. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Rebecca," he began, "you've had time to observe. I'd like to be clear with you about your role moving forward." He spoke plainly. The company was undergoing a silent restructuring. Profits had plateaued. Internal culture was stagnant. "We need to trim, carefully," he said. "But more importantly, we need to identify where the rot is." I said nothing. He continued. "Your discretion so far has been noted. That's part of why we chose you. No one suspects you're anything but a procedural consultant." I nodded slowly. "And what exactly do you want from me?" He leaned forward. "I want names, patterns, proof. We don't fire people here unless it's clean. But it's time." The air in the room felt sharper after that. I understood the game now. I wasn't just observing toxicity. I was the scalpel being guided by an invisible hand. I left the meeting and walked the long corridor back to my office. Along the way, I passed a group of employees near the vending machine. One of them glanced at me and muttered something under his breath. They all laughed. I didn't flinch. Back at my desk, I closed the performance review spreadsheets and opened a blank document titled Primary Assessment, Phase 1. I wrote the date, added a table, and typed the first name. Lucas. Observed behaviors. Interrupting, exclusion tactics, dominance in meetings, dismissive tone. Next, Julia. Pattern. Undercutting. Public sarcasm. Undermining leadership. Groupthink influencer. I paused. The plan was no longer just to record. I had a directive now. This wasn't about being accepted or respected. It was about precision. They thought they were dealing with an outsider with no real authority. But I wasn't just in the building. I was inside the system. The next phase wasn't about confrontation. It was about clarity. I shifted my focus from visible behavior to structure. Who followed whom in meetings? Who waited for someone else to speak before nodding in agreement? Who rolled their eyes when names were mentioned? I began scheduling quiet one-on-one conversations under the pretext of cultural assessment interviews. No one questioned it. They thought it was bureaucracy. I met with receptionists, assistants, junior analysts, people who rarely spoke up in meetings but saw everything. In a 30-minute chat with Anna from accounting, I learned that Julia had accidentally taken credit for a presentation Anna built from scratch. Twice. When Anna gently brought it up, she was told, "It's better for the company if someone with authority presents it." Carlos from logistics mentioned that Lucas frequently joked about people being soft or emotional whenever feedback was brought up. "If you can't take heat, get out of the kitchen," was one of his favorites. I recorded it all, verbatim, with timestamps. The real revelations, though, came not from words, but silences. People hesitated before answering certain questions. They looked at the door, lowered their voices. It became clear that the hostility I'd felt wasn't personal. It was systemic. The same people who excluded me were the ones creating a climate of fear. Even Mauro, the junior employee who had defended me earlier, admitted off the record that he'd stopped suggesting new ideas after Julia laughed at one of his slides in a team meeting. "It's easier to stay quiet," he said. "Just survive the week." By now, my document had grown to 32 pages. Each person had a section. Each incident was labeled exclusion, undermining, verbal dismissal, power hoarding. Patterns emerged in color-coded cells. The same 5 names appeared again and again. I wasn't just identifying toxicity. I was building an ecosystem map. Who fed whom? Who enabled silence? Who looked away? They thought I was invisible, but I saw everything. Midway through my 3rd week, the tipping point arrived. During a strategy session, Julia presented a workflow that, according to her, she had developed over the weekend. I recognized it immediately. It was a draft I had saved in a shared folder the day before, untouched except for a new title and minor formatting. She hadn't even changed the color palette. I didn't say a word. I just noted it in my file under plagiarism, internal presentation. Then I cross-referenced the file timestamps, took screenshots, and emailed myself a backup with encrypted tags. That evening, I created a new section in the report, Ethical Breaches, documented. The next day, I intercepted 2 more moments. Lucas, rolling his eyes as a junior associate, explained a technical detail during a client prep meeting, then loudly correcting him with wrong data. No one challenged him. The associate looked down and mumbled an apology. I followed up privately and verified. The junior's version had been correct all along. In private interviews, more employees started opening up. As word got around that I was actually listening, the tone changed. I heard about a designer who had cried in the restroom after being mocked in a meeting, a marketing intern who had been left out of team lunches for 3 straight months, a finance analyst who submitted 3 ideas in a row, all of which disappeared, only to reappear in presentations led by the same 3 core employees. Each account painted the same picture, a company where a select group controlled the narrative, silenced dissent, and polished their image while stepping on others. It wasn't just mean behavior. It was structural gaslighting. The most telling moment came in an interview with an older employee, Sylvia, who had been at the company for over 12 years. She leaned in and said, "Everyone thinks you're just ticking boxes, but you're not, are you? You're documenting." I didn't confirm or deny. I just met her eyes and gave a small nod. Back at my desk, I updated the report. I highlighted the 5 most consistent offenders in red. The masks weren't slipping anymore. They had come off. By the time I compiled the final report, it spanned 58 pages. I printed 2 copies, one for Antonio, the other for the legal department. Everything was backed with dates, documents, first-hand accounts, and in several cases, screenshots of internal communications. I had organized it by category: toxic leadership patterns, cultural impact, ethical violations, and finally, recommendations. Each section was clean, labeled, and impossible to argue with. When I stepped into Antonio's office, he greeted me with the same reserved expression he always wore. I placed the report on his desk and sat down, waiting. He flipped through the pages slowly, occasionally stopping to skim a paragraph. Then he set it down and looked at me for the first time in the meeting. "This is comprehensive," he said, "and brutal." I remained silent. He nodded once. "It's exactly what we needed." I left the report with him and headed straight to a meeting with legal and compliance. There, I walked them through the documentation step by step, anticipating every question. every potential rebuttal. I made it clear. No assumptions, no feelings, only patterns backed by data. None of this is hearsay, I told them. If we act, it will be clean. They agreed. There would be no messy warnings, no vague improvement plans. The evidence was enough for immediate termination. That evening, I stayed late. I cleaned my desk, made sure all personal files were wiped, and packed my notes. Not because I was leaving, but because I wanted nothing tying me to what would come next. I wasn't there to explain or justify. I had done my part. As I walked through the empty halls, I passed the familiar desks. I looked at the names on the doors, the faces I'd memorized. The same people who whispered and laughed when I arrived were still oblivious to what sat now on the director's desk. I paused at the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. The silence felt different. Not cold, just full. The next morning, the office was quieter than usual. Tension vibrated through the air, subtle, like static. I arrived at my desk to find an email marked High Importance from Antonio. Begin at 10 a.m., HR conference room. Bring no personal items. They knew. I watched as names were called one by one. Lucas went in first. He looked confused, maybe slightly annoyed. When he came out 10 minutes later, his face was pale, his jaw clenched. He walked straight past his desk and didn't say a word to anyone. Then came Julia. She paused at the door, gave a short laugh like she thought it was a joke. 30 minutes later, she stormed out red-faced, eyes glossy, dragging a box with her name scrawled on it in marker. The others followed. 3 more employees from the infamous group chat. Each meeting ended the same way. Brief, silent exits. No farewell emails. No last words. Some didn't even look back. The ones who remained didn't speak above a whisper. No one dared to approach me. I didn't attend the meetings. That was intentional. My part was done. I sat at my desk, continued reviewing onboarding files, made notes on employee wellness suggestions. I stayed calm, collected, present, but distant. Around midday, Mauro passed by my desk. He looked uncertain, like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. He cleared his throat. People are saying you had something to do with this. I met his eyes. People say a lot of things. He hesitated, then nodded. Thank you, he said quietly. I nodded back. By the end of the day, 5 desks were empty. Half the whispers had vanished. The group that once dominated meetings joked in corners and mocked what they didn't understand. Gone. There were no announcements, no statements, just open chairs, silenced chats, and the quiet shift of atmosphere. I packed up for the day, checked the hallway, and paused once more at the elevator. This time, when I pressed the button, I heard someone behind me say, "She did what no one else had the courage to do." I didn't turn around. I just stepped in and let the doors close. The shift didn't happen overnight, but it was immediate in feeling. The following Monday, people greeted each other with a strange mix of caution and relief. Desks were reorganized. Meetings started on time. The jokes stopped, not because of fear, but because the silence they used to fill now had space for other voices. Mauro was the first to speak up in a team session. He presented a redesign idea that had been shelved months earlier. This time, it was heard. Not just nodded at, actually discussed. I watched the conversation flow with real exchange. No interruptions, no smirks. I requested a small budget for a series of internal workshops focused on communication and emotional safety. Antonio approved it within the hour. We launched the first session on a Thursday morning. Psychological safety in the workplace. Half the team showed up voluntarily. By the 3rd session, we had a waiting list. I created an anonymous feedback portal. Something simple, just a form. But within days, real stories began to pour in. Most weren't complaints. They were ideas. People felt safer now. They felt visible. The juniors who once avoided eye contact now lingered after meetings to ask questions, share thoughts. One morning, Anna from accounting stopped by my desk. "I just wanted to say, it feels lighter in here," she said, placing a small plant next to her monitor. "Like we can finally breathe." I knew what she meant. The leadership team also started shifting. Less performance theater, more listening. They stopped talking at people and started asking questions. I held private coaching sessions with each of them, not to punish, but to build. It wasn't about replacing people with better ones. It was about allowing the right people to speak. I watched as invisible employees became seen and hesitant ones stepped forward. The change wasn't dramatic. It was human, simple, and after weeks of resistance, suspicion, and silence, the company began to sound different, not louder, just clearer. I stayed 3 more weeks, long enough to oversee the new HR structure, ensure the transition plans were in motion, and leave every document properly archived. There were no parties, no speeches. That was by design. On my last day, I arrived early, like always. I walked the hallways slowly, noting how different everything felt. There were new voices in the meeting rooms, quieter ones finally participating. Someone had drawn a smiley face on the whiteboard near the break room. Someone else had brought homemade muffins. At my desk, a folded card waited for me. No name on the outside. Inside, it read in small, neat handwriting. "You didn't say much, but we heard everything. Thank you." I placed it in my bag without a word. At noon, I met with Antonio for our final check-in. He stood when I entered, something he hadn't done before. "You changed more than just the org chart," he said. I gave a half smile. "I didn't change anything. I just revealed what was already there." He nodded, then handed me a final folder. "If you ever want to return—" "I won't," I said gently, cutting him off. "But thank you." There was no need for drama, no need to announce my impact. My job was never about being seen. It was about seeing. I cleared my desk, left my badge on top of the keyboard, and stepped into the hallway. On my way out, I passed the same receptionist who had once looked at me with hesitation. This time, she smiled fully. "Take care, Rebecca." I smiled back. "You too." Outside, the air felt warmer. The city moved as it always had, indifferent to what had shifted behind those glass doors. I didn't look back. Some victories don't need applause, some justice doesn't need volume, and sometimes the most lasting change begins in silence and leaves the loudest echo behind.